Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Sun is Coming podcast.
Yeah.
I'm here with my co-host, Kaleb, and a very good friend of mine, the one and only, the gorilla, Adam Skidmore. I'm glad you're here, buddy.
I'm happy to be here.
You have to speak up a little bit. I think that might be... I'm just kidding.
I'm happy to be here.
It has... I'm very glad that we got you here. Yeah. You were in Chicagoland with us in the beautiful area, and you've now moved down south like a snowbird. And just moving on south, down in Jacksonville.
You're in your pre-retirement phase.
Just wanted to try it out before it became reality.
You're just not playing enough, you're not playing enough golf yet.
It's true. I need to get on that.
Yeah. But we've been friends for, I don't know, 3-4 years now.
Dude, yeah. Do you remember how we became friends?
I mean...
I want to hear your version of the story.
I want to know what your story is.
Yeah,
I think it might be different than mine.
Okay, I'll go first. Well, we were looking to hire someone.
Okay, it's the same one.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We were looking to hire someone at the church I was at, and you were with Slingshot.
Yeah.
And this role that we had, production role, it was the one that we wanted to really get right. And so brought you in, had no idea who you are, but I don't know how. Did Steven?
I think it was a Steven connection.
Connection, that's
Steven
right.
Hull.
Brought in, and it wound up being a complete success story. We have a guy that we hired, and he's still there, and he crushed it. He was everything that it was a perfect example of that thing going as well as you could have hoped. And then I just think through the process, I'm like, I kind of like this guy. This guy's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's he was a good hire for sure. What's so funny is like Nathaniel. Well, you know this. He used to work. He worked for me or was an intern for me at the chapel.
Yeah.
He did not like me. He did not like me at all. I think I was too rigid for him.
What's even funnier is he was at Judson.
That's right.
Was he going to college there? I don't remember. He was the tech there, and so with Vertical, we came in, and I was running front of house for it. And I don't think I was super kind because I was like, the monitor situation was like a mess. And I'm like, and at the time he was kind of like, yeah, I don't know, dude. And I'm like, well, you kind of need to know because we can't do anything. and so I was just like, I did not have a good first impression. I don't think I remember that was him until after we hired, but dude, the guy that you brought in, I was like, I saw everything that I wanted to see him, and it turned out to be amazing. So anyways, those types of situations, like that was a big win on all fronts, and so we have a friendship that came out of it.
Yeah, it was. That was really.
I'm just surprised that you guys were both in the Chicago like tech space and had never met before.
Well, Harvest was.
Yeah.
Well, you were on staff at Harvest. For anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah.
Harvest Bible Chapel, and you guys were in your own like world.
It's funny how you think when you're in that bubble, you think, oh, we're like God's gift to the world.
Yep.
And like, since I've moved, like no one in Florida, they're like, who's James? What's Harvest? What's all that? What's Vertical? What's that?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay.
It's so funny. Well, I mean, what's so funny is like years ago, even when I was doing that with you guys for the first time, this was like in 2008, I was at the National Worship Leaders Conference in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. This is a very it's like the first worship leader conference. And I was like a volunteer at my church, and they brought all of us down there, right? And I remember somehow we were at a lunch with Jacob and Meredith Andrews.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I was in high school at the time, and I was like, wow, I'm sitting with like Meredith Andrews from Vertical Worship and Harvest Bible Chapel. And at the time, that was like peak of what they were doing. And it was just cool to see that, and then come full circle, 12 years later to be in that church and helping them out with that, and making an awesome friendship out of it. So it's super cool.
It's been quite a dream.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your history a little bit, so people know a little bit of what it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll give the 10,000 foot view of it, but basically was a musician, went to college on a classical guitar scholarship.
Really?
Hey, you know that?
I didn't know that. The nylon strings and everything.
Went to Elmhurst College. Okay. Got a scholarship, which was honestly the only reason I was able to probably afford it. And So I went there, did what you would call a music business degree, which was in their realm, it was like taking a bunch of business classes, a ton of music classes, and then this
Now you know both.
well, then there was this one guy that did like these like actual, it was basically like record label type classes. And he was not a good teacher. He would just tell, most of the classes was him just telling like stories about what he did. And so they take all that, mash it together, and you'd have like a music business degree. And so, one of the things that was cool towards the end of that though, was that you had to do a 6-month internship to kind of graduate. And so at that point in time, I'd been doing a bunch of music stuff. Music was heavily like my focus. I did get to do a lot of recording stuff as well as part of that. But, I was getting towards the end, I'm just like looking at like, what I'm going to do with like this degree and like classical guitar to like make a living. And
are you telling me that there's not like a bunch of classical guitar players making tons of money these days?
Evidently not.
Yeah.
But
what you need to do is start like an Instagram channel where you just do like funky classical guitar covers.
Yeah.
It probably would take off.
Probably would do pretty well. I think I'm terrible at it now though.
I'm gonna hear it. Let's go.
All right, sometime. So anyways, but I just like, it was interesting. I'd always been interested in audio, even like at a young age, like listening to albums. I didn't like know like the intricacies of it, but I do like, I think I listened pretty intently to like what was going on with albums and concerts. And I knew that area existed. And so I just was like, I kind of want to dive into that. And so I wound up doing my 6-month internship over at Willow Creek with Ron Cook and Scott Ragsdale.
Oh my gosh, yes. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and so I did it for like 30 hours a week. I was like kind of with them and learning, and they had no idea how green I was, and I tried to keep it that way. But I think
funny.
I probably, when I was asking them like what a matrix was, and they're probably like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Gosh,
But
that's funny.
yeah, so I basically did that for 6 months, and I mean, I learned a ton. I wish I could have done it honestly after working at Harvest for a year, because I feel like I would have probably gotten more out of it. But I still learned a lot. I got to do some mixing, and then from there, basically, I had a contact from Harvest, because I had attended Harvest even before working there. We had attended there since I was in 5th grade, so it was my home church. Yeah. Knew a lot of people there, and someone had reached out and just been like, "We are looking for." Part-time mixer for student ministry. And I'm just like, you know what, let's give it a shot. And so I did that. And really I definitely had a knack for mixing. Technical was always the thing that I was kind of like ramping up to try and know what I was doing. And so I did that, worked on an analog console and just was mixing, doing like enough to where the pastor there was like, I think you know what you're doing. This is the wildest thing to date that happened though. So Vertical, and I think this is like honestly God's hand on it. Vertical was basically starting at the same time that I was starting there. And so I had been at the church maybe 6 months, had mixed 2 weekend services at that point, and had mixed on a digital console probably only like for a certain amount of time. And so so Vertical is like having their first big like tour and partnering with James, doing a book tour, all this thing. And they're doing a 40-city bus tour.
It's a lot.
Dude,
How many weeks was that?
It was over...
Was there breaks?
There was, but not much. In classic Harvest fashion, it was now for me, I was 22, and so I was like eating it up. Like
sure.
it was the best. I was literally living the dream. And I think there was people who had been a little bit more seasoned who were like, who had families. And all that. It was like, it was like tough. But so basically though, like they're like, you're going to be the audio guy for this tour. And when I say I'd been like, it was the whole, like, don't let people know what you don't know. And this was a moment where there was plenty of opportunities for me. Like we didn't even travel with our own PA. So we were like, we would do venues anywhere from like big church auditoriums to, I remember doing like a 3-tier like balcony, like theater, opera hall theater to like, it was as wide range of an experience. Now the thing that I grew from it though was like without traveling with a PA, it was literally every week it was dialing in the sound. So the thing that I did have, that I knew I had going for me is I knew what it should sound like. The thing was every week, like or every event, it was how do I get it there? And so thankfully there's a guy, Reese Tenhaken, shout out to him. He was someone that I grew immensely from. He came on the first, I think 3 or 4, and he really set me up well. And so I was dumb enough to just think that I could do it, and he made sure that I could actually do
Honestly,
it.
it's probably good that you didn't know what you know.
There was honestly a level of ignorance was bliss, and I was just like, dude, this is gonna be awesome, and whatever.
Yep.
And by God's grace, we didn't have, like, I can honestly say every event was pretty killer. Like, there was no like, and there was, but like through that, like I remember like people who were hearing me mix kind of before that, and then when I came back from that tour, and I would mix on a weekend, like people are like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Because it was a pressure cooker of just like refining every day, like the audio. Because we travel with all our own backline. So I had the same console, had the same inputs, ears, whatever. All that was the same. The differences were always the PA and the room. And so each day was me having a whole new set of problems to figure out how do I get that sound that I know we should get. And I came back and it was the fastest, most intense growth that I've ever had to date in that moment. And so thankfully it went really well. And then from there, I was able to kind of like become Vertical's main front of house guy. And it was like, when I say God's hand was on it, like it just was a moment in time that if that went poorly, it could very much have been like very bad for me.
Yeah, dude.
And thankfully it went really well. And so then I got the things that I got to do and experience with Vertical is just like I knew I was living like a dream. Like it was, I'm immensely thankful for it. So many experiences, they're just countless. Like I traveled a ton. And it was cool because it felt like I never did the tour thing, but it felt like it was a middle ground of like having a consistent full-time job where I get to kind of like do, and we did, I mean, early on, we did that 40 city bus tour. I mean, that was a legit tour. We did with Vertical, we did about 6 of our own, like basically our own ran tours, because at that point, Harvest had 150 fellowship churches.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that became kind of like the tour circuit to go around and go to all the fellowships. It was awesome. We built so many relationships through that, and I got to meet a ton of production guys through that. And so it was cool. I kind of got that experience without having to be out on the road for like 3 months at a time or whatever. And so that was like the first kind of part of Harvest was heavily focusing on getting the best that I could at audio. And that's still to date the thing that I like really enjoy creatively and artistically is mixing. Like that's as all you guys do too. And so that's something that was, I think, heavy focus. And then, that was probably first 4 years there. And then there was a shift. I didn't realize this when I was kind of, 'cause like I said, I was just happy to be there.
Yep.
You're just like, this is awesome.
Yep.
But culturally, the team there was some tough things with the culture on the team that made it to where ministries did not enjoy working with production.
Yeah.
And so I remember there was a guy, Dan Sumter, who was a worship pastor, but had a lot of leadership and like management, and just, I mean, he's the guy still to date that I've learned the most from in leadership and management. And so it was not going well, and he kind of was brought in to kind of revamp that. And so me and him over 5 years, it took literally 5 years, because you're going through, there was, I would say, some bad hires, some just bad cultural, like people who were not functioning. I mean, the gist of it would be any opportunity to say no to something or say it was too difficult, they would jump on. And so ministry's like, well, like what have we been doing? Like it made it very difficult for people to work. And so we took that pendulum and went fully to, we're not saying no to anything. Yeah. Which is became its own other thing. But through, hopefully through some good hiring practices, through, it's like, I view it as like a teeter-totter, and you're just like, if this is like culture in a way that's really bad, you just kind of have to keep trying to work towards getting that thing. And then eventually you get the momentum where it's on the other side. And all of a sudden, if you're the person who is not good culturally, you also all of a sudden start to stick out. Whereas before you fit right in. And it was like, if you were someone that was trying to do, good, healthy things, it was kind of like you were the oddball. And so I remember when we made some good hires, we had made some good groundwork, and when that thing flipped, it was like, it was great. And so I learned a lot in leadership and management through Dan at that point. I was, I think, in a technical director role at that point, overseeing 4 of the 7 campuses. So I had kind of started to step into leadership, and but that was a really pinnacle moment for me of learning about how you build team chemistry, team dynamics, culture. And so we went to the other side of the spectrum where we said yes to everything. And Dave at that time was in the pinnacle at Dave Putnam. Me and him were kind of like the 2 technical directors working together in tangent. And I remember this was like 2017, where we had like the best year ever, just like crushed it. But it was at like, we both were like, at what cost?
Yes.
And so that was when we had to have some hard conversation, because the staffing and the resourcing was low. We were doing like massive things. I mean, we were doing large scale events every month. It was, I mean, ripping and roaring. To date, like where I'm at now, they'll say like, oh yeah, this is like pretty fast paced. And I'm like, like it was.
And you guys were doing albums too, like verticals.
We were doing albums,
like releasing all the time.
We were, I mean, you had Walk in the Word, which was James's radio ministry. You had the Fellowship, so a lot of things we were doing with the Fellowship. You had HGA, you had the school.
Yeah.
You had James's own, like, you had Act Like Men conference. We were doing. There was a couple of years where we were doing 6 arena Act Like Men events where it was literally 8,000 to 10,000 people in an arena doing. So it was. That's the part that was wild about it. Is like it was. We joke it was almost like a drug. It really was like there was this like event high you would get off of things, and it really was like so we were doing amazing things and we loved it, but they were just, as far as work-life balance, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
It was, you were all in. And I mean, we had one day off a week, and you had, immense amount of nights, whatever you're working, traveling, all these, it just, and that was the culture. The culture was, you were all in, or you're not, are you not a part of this?
Yeah.
And it was, and so that was, I remember in that season, that was where we were like, we need to figure out how to meet the need. And so we started really adding some people on, which was helpful. And so I said, so all that to say, that was, and then everything kind of, we got people on for 2018. That was like the last year of just like, we did a Good Friday, Easter at the Sears Center. We did, it was
I forgot about that.
I got to travel. I got to travel with Vertical and do Outcry Tour, which was with
Jesus Culture, and
it was with so it was Vertical, Mosaic, Bethel, and Elevation.
Oh, okay.
And so we were second in line. So Mosaic opened, it was us, and it was like 20 dates. I knew, like, that was the moment where I'm like, this is as good as it gets, because being an artist front of house guy, it was white gloving to the fullest. They had a full tour tech team that was managing. I would just show up, mix. I mean, I got to do the Greek theater. I got to do all these arenas. It was, so there was all these things that were happening. It was kind of the pinnacle of everything that was happening at Harvest. It was, and we finally had got some people on board to kind of meet the demand. We were still very understaffed, but it was, compared to what we were doing, it felt at least more manageable. And then 2019 is when everything kind of just,
And even when I think about like those dates for you guys, like you were still leading on Sunday. The guys who were doing vertical shows on a Thursday night, okay, well, we're coming back to do normal weekend services, like nothing happened. And
that was the whole thing. It was always, when I say it was like all in, the idea of like comp time and like, I remember you had to like fight for it. And even when you'd fight for it, it'd be like, what's going on here? Is this the new version of you? Like that wants to like have time outside of work.
Man.
And I get it. Like looking back on it, it was a 100-mile-an-hour train, and everyone was just like, it was exciting. Amazing ministry was happening. That's the one thing that I will never go to and say like, oh, was ministry even happening, or like trying to throw out the ministry. Like the Lord was doing amazing things. Yeah. And it was awesome to be a part of it. I think people just got caught up in it. And I think it was like, that was the thing. And so for a lot of people, it was their whole life. And so everyone expected that almost. And so, I mean, you go on a 2-week tour, come back, and you have to make sure production back home's going well, campus are filled. So that's why like having resources to even meet that demand was huge, because you know, we were extending ourselves so far, and in order to do that, like something has to give.
Yeah.
And so
and the speed of a team, right? Like if you're on a train and you're on a plane or whatever, right? And you have 150 other people with you on this plane or train or whatever, you can look around and go, we're all going the same speed, and it feels normal, right?
Yeah.
But until you are either off the train and watching it fly by or continue on without you, you don't realize the speed of the pace that we were moving, because everybody around you is doing the same thing. And so it doesn't feel any different.
Well, and for me, it was my first, so I graduated and I started, like, it was my first and only experience in ministry. So in my mind, you're just kind of like, I didn't realize I had signed up for like this thing. Like I just, it was my home church. It was like the thing. I'm just excited to work in my home church. And as I got more and more into it, I was just kind of like, oh, this just must be how ministry operates. And so you're right. Thankfully, I got to experience it all there, because, and what I mean by that is once everything kind of imploded a bit in 2019, you then have the years after where that pendulum went from super high paced almost to what I then experienced, which was the other side of the spectrum, which was like nothing happening.
Yeah.
Not nothing, but like,
You guys weren't doing much when I came around.
for sure.
Yeah.
Like everything coming to a screeching halt, and feeling a void of leadership, and feeling kind of like, what are we doing? And I've told people this, I would actually, there's a healthy middle, and so I would take the healthy middle. But if I had to pick one, I would actually probably pick the crazy, fast-paced train. Well, I say that with having a family, I wouldn't now.
There's
but
different life stages.
There's life stages, but what I would say is, at least in that realm, you feel very much like you're attached to something that's larger, more purposeful, and all that. And what happens when you get to, like, the pace was slower, and which was great, but you also felt kind of like you weren't attached, and you felt isolated. You felt really like disconnected from, or even like what is our vision? And those things can actually be more devastating, and kind of, I felt very, I wouldn't use the word depressed, but it was hard to stay motivated, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've had to, being there long enough, I was able to see, which I think is pretty unique, to see an organization go from two sides of a spectrum, of that to that. And then ultimately, I think, as we speak now, I think they're probably trying to figure out where that middle ground is, and realizing that this is not a sustainable place to be, and and I think they're trying to figure out where that. But yeah, so through all that, I was able to get a unique perspective on all that.
Yeah.
Which is something I know you wanted to talk about. 2020 is where I actually stepped away from production, which is
after 10 years at that point. 8 years. I don't remember how long.
like 8 to 9 years. Yeah. So a little bit on that side, like I had been doing it for a while. I mean, I had done, like I said, everything under the sun that you could kind of do in production, and church had kind of gone through, and in the midst of a very large, senior pastor stepping away, all of leadership, and really just kind of having a not complete, but a pretty significant void in leadership, especially coming off of where we were at. And so I had been feeling, I think, in that, a sense of like, I'm kind of like ready for something else. And one of the things that was cool, being in the production head that time, we were actually part of the ministry side, not the operational side. And so I got to be on the ministry leadership team. I remember in 2020 being there, and we're working through the goals of the church. Like, what are the things we want to get after in 2020? This is like right before COVID hit. So it was
That's crazy, man.
yeah, that's a whole other thing. But they just were like, like we'd love to have like a young adults ministry. We didn't have a young adults ministry. There was nothing past student ministry. And I remember just for me, like my time, like going to college was very much walking away from the Lord and just kind of like being like, I just want to like see what the world has to offer. Nothing crazy, but just like I wasn't walking with the Lord for sure. And so it wasn't until I kind of came back to work that I kind of rededicated and so I just had a real heart for that idea of like so many people go through high school and student ministry, and then it's like you step away from that, and it's like the percentages of people that walk away from it is just because they're on their own to kind of figure it out. They've been under, they've been with their parents, and I think that a lot of times that's the first moment where they're like, is this my thing or is this my parents' thing? Like, and so anyways, they're like, we would love to do a young adults ministry, but classically, like we're not hiring for it. So like and so I was just like, there was in a headspace where I just raised my hand. I'm like, you know what? So I'm like, I have a passion for this. I think it'd be awesome for our church to invest in this, and like whatever I can do to help with that would be great. So there was me and another guy who kind of raised our hands. The guy was a little more of a seasoned like ministry guy, so he kind of like was the guy that was going to drive it, and then I was going to like support and still lead production, but basically have young adults be just a thing that I was going to do. On top of it, COVID happens, and perfect time to try and do young adults ministry. But so I remember it was we tried doing virtual stuff. It was terrible, and it was like, but I do remember. So we did our first. It was like towards the end of like hitting the fall, and it was just like the very beginning stages where people were like, maybe we could do something in person. Yeah. And we did our first. We just like did our first young adults event, and it was not advertised well. The team was not functioning on all cylinders at this time, but we were, we just, one of the guys on staff had a big property out in Barrington, and so we're just like, you know what, let's just try to do like a worship night and like a thing at his like property.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I still remember we had 300 young adults show up in this guy's backyard.
I feel like I remember you calling me afterwards because you were very stressed leading up.
I was,
because you're like, I know how to do production. I don't know
for sure
how to do this, and there's measurable like outcomes in production. You go, did the weekend work or did it not? And what went wrong?
It's very easy to know if you're successful.
Did people? It's very hard to find success in that.
Yeah, you are correct. That was the biggest, I think, learning curve for me, and that was, I am someone that's wired very much to have very measurables of productivity, being successful. And in production, I mean, you got projects, you got events, you got recruiting volunteers, you got all these things that are very like if those things are happening, you're like, I can see. And in ministry, this is why I look back at this time in young adults is like some of the most valuable time, because it gives you a lens of what a lot of the ministry leaders that we're supporting are going through, which is, it's just a different, they aren't, I grabbed coffee with 5 young adults and invested in them. Importantly, there was an event that we had that, that night that we had 300 people come. It was amazing. I remember sitting in the back, just like bawling my eyes out of like, I can't believe the Lord brought these people here. Like it was wild. But then you walk away from that and you're like, okay, so like, what was that? What came of that? And I think what I learned is there's definitely more of a long game mentality of being consistent, being faithful in it, and just like over time, you're walking with the young adults and helping them grow and come alongside of them. And it wound up being something that I did it for, I think, like 3 years.
It's crazy.
Eventually it wound up being where I completely stepped away from production. I was basically like the uncle, the weird uncle that would mix on weekends. But my main job, my whole like salary was paid by young adults, which is wild.
Yeah, it's wild.
And so I just look back on it immensely fondly and learned so much. And to this day, like that's a lens that was developed through that has given me such a great perspective when you're on the production side, which I'm back on, and how you can support ministry and what are those guys going through, because I literally did it. Yeah. What wound up happening is the guy who was the main ministry person wound up leaving to go to that church. And so I remember going to my boss and being like, hey, so like, what do we do here? And he's like, just keep running with it, bro. And I'm like, so I wound up being the guy. And I wasn't the one preaching. My role and the thing that I was able to do well was to lead the team and align people in their roles and kind of rally people around the vision of what young adults was. And so I led it, but like I had guys who preached, I had guys who did worship and all that. And so it was a beautiful thing where I got to kind of lead this team and build this ministry. And it was awesome to see like worship guys get honestly excited to like partner with it. And we did like a live recording and we did all these like things, and it became a space where, I got to meet so many young adults and got to like, just do a lot of ministry with some great people. So it was a very special time in my life to do that. And I think ultimately, like I said, I think it was great for when I did it. And I think long term for how I'm wired, it was also really hard because, like I said, the measurables, I just was always in my head of like, all right, who's going to show up tonight?
Yeah.
What's gonna come of this night? Like, is there fruit in it? And I think ultimately what I learned from it was, and we're not entrusted with the fruit of it. In the sense, what I mean by that is, we're entrusted with like what is our teachers teaching? How are we giving our best to minister and to partner with people? And then on the back end, it's in the Lord's hands of what happens with that. If we're giving our best and we're bringing our best, and I've learned to let go of that and to trust Him in the process. And so I think I grew a lot through that. But ultimately, I think it was hard and it was very insecure. There was a lot of insecurity in it, a lot of like, why am I the guy doing this? Yeah. And I still feel that in a lot of things I'm doing. But I think ultimately, there was a season where I had to jump back into production, and then I think that ultimately, I think it was a season that the Lord had me in it for it. I think it was great, and I think that I'm using that now to better lead and manage production teams.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So let's fast forward then to, you kind of have this roller coaster experience at Harvest. You're there for 12 plus years, kind of get to experience so many different aspects of ministry within production, creative, and then now with young adults outside of that. And now you find yourself stepping into a completely new role that you've only been in for a few months.
Yeah, 7 months.
Yeah, and having to say, learn a culture, learn teams, lead a team that you're inheriting and build that team towards the future. So like, how has that been? Kind of almost starting over again after a really long run.
Well, tell me where you're at too.
Yeah. So I'm at a church called Church 1122 down in Jacksonville, Florida. And somebody would be saying, well, that seems like a big move. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Chicago. I haven't been anywhere else. And so just a little backstory, even just to the end of it. So I come out of young adults. They kind of bring me in to help with the creative department. Things were kind of having a hard time there. And so I actually get brought in not only to lead production, but kind of partner with the creative director to like help things go well. And I think just in that process, came to the conclusion that with where the church is at and where I was at, I'm someone that always wants to be growing and kind of moving forward. And I think there was a lot still being figured out. And it was just kind of clear that I think it was my time, which was a tough decision to come to. But I felt a sense of, I think it's time to hand this thing off. And thankfully in the production realm, we had a team, and there's two guys in particular who I felt very confident could take it. And I think they were ready. Honestly, I was probably hindering their growth.
Yeah.
And so in all of that, I had a couple of friends who had left and had been down there, and I just hearing what they were seeing at this church, and I really trusted their insight. I was just like starting to kind of like check it out at the same time where I felt like I was ready for something else. And eventually, like the teaching was very strong theologically. Everything, I mean, honestly, it felt a lot like Harvest. Mm-hmm. But being through everything I went through, there was a lot of things I was very much looking at that would make me feel comfortable to move. And so eventually, I'm talking with my wife, and we're just kind of like, all right, we just kind of have to go down there and give it a real, like, check it out and see. We can talk about it all day, and so we wound up going down there they brought us down there for 3 days and just instantly, like through the people that I met and feeling the culture and worship and all that, and just seeing the vision, it was like, I want us to be a part of it. And the thing that very much, as I was leading our family and we were talking about it, this wasn't a thing that was a career move, although like obviously it was.
Yeah.
That felt very cheap, and it wasn't like the fun, cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Because that also felt very empty. But ultimately, like when I was down there, I'm like, this is a place that I want my family to invest in the future. Yeah. And equally, I felt like would be heavily invested in. Mm-hmm. And to me, at that point, it was like, okay, I think it's because all our family is local here. I was like, that's worth uprooting for the first time ever and going down and being a part of what's happening. And so I'm 7 months into that. And it has, by God's grace, it has been everything that what I saw. I mean, I think I saw like 80% of it. I'm like, okay, we'll leave the 20% to like figure out. But I think my time at Harvest gave me a very well-rounded view to where I like knew what to look for. Mm-hmm. And so everything I was seeing, I was like, man. I had a couple of friends there too who I worked with at Harvest who had been there for a little while, and they're like, I know it feels. They did the same thing. Like we kind of came and we're like, all right, when's the shoe gonna drop? Like, and it's like it never did. And so it's just a beautiful place where, I mean, I didn't get to see their code of conducts beforehand, but the people that I interacted with and the culture that I felt through them, when I got there and actually like got that stuff, I'm like, oh, it makes sense because they just have the culture is really defined, and I think they do a really good job of having a high bar of excellence partnered with humility and genuine authenticity of like, it's a privilege to get to do this here, that the Lord is using us in this place.
Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, you went through some stuff, right, at Harvest. And what's cool about it too, that I think, it wasn't an immediate departure following the craziness that happened. There's a lot of
like 4 years after that.
That's a long time. There's a lot of stuff that happened in those 4 years to recover from the initial wave of staff that left and the initial hurt, and then led into where are we today, and kind of living in.
Yeah, I mean, people would ask me for sure because I mean, being there anywhere for 12 years, like amount of people and rounds of people, and people would ask like, why are you still there? And for me, like I always was like, okay, I saw 2019 as definitely a pruning of like what were some unhealthy things culturally there. Yeah. And so I'm like, the Lord prunes to bear fruit. And so I'm like, I want to like hang through and see what the fruit is of this. And that they brought in a great lead pastor, and so he's an incredible teacher, and I think he's carried a lot of the weight of keeping the thing going, and he was someone that I definitely and still I wanted to do ministry with him, and he had crossed or checked off a lot of the things of like he was doing it in a healthy way, and there's a lot of things I'm like, this is definitely different in a good way from where it was, and so I wanted to help see some of that fruit come to me, and we did it for 4 years, and up until when I think it was kind of my time.
I think a lot of people in ministry who have been around to see some stuff like that happen, I see a lot of departures happen after things stabilize a little bit. Yeah, they're like, okay, I held it together with duct tape and shoelaces, and I kind of, now pass it to the next guy to help run with. Yeah. And by the time they sit back after that time and they go, oh, I don't know if I can be here anymore. Like it's exhausting. I made it this far. Yeah. I think that's why so many, people left during COVID. They survived, and it was that 2021 that was the biggest year of transition. Like, okay, we're back open. All right. And then all of a sudden everybody left because there was, stability and.
Well, you could say, I could say, I look back and I'm like, well, no one was giving me jobs. So there could be some level of which, some level, there just wasn't, and I wasn't heavily looking, but there was nothing that popped up that said,
take a look at this.
Yeah, it's my time. And so I just took that as, it's not my time yet.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I was feeling like it was my time and the timing, I truly believe was God's hand on it, that thing pops up around the time where it's just like, I really think it's my time. And those two marrying together, it just was like, and so until I just was trusting up until that point, like God's going to show me when it's my time. And so it was a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So anyways, so yeah, being at Church 1122, I mean, it's been a wonderful change culturally and even just redefining how I viewed ministry. It's been, I've also had to open up a lot of cylinders that didn't exist or they haven't been used in a while. And it was like, so there's some definitely, I feel that a little bit, but it's also, I also enjoy that.
Well, because it's got to, you guys you talked about earlier the crazy fast pace you're running at Harvest from, let's say, 2013 to 2019. And then everything hit the fan, COVID happened, the chaos, but then slowed down a little bit. And then you left. And, for anybody who doesn't know about the church you're at now, like it's very fast paced. You're launching 1 billion campuses like every week, it sounds like.
Feels like it.
And you jumped in the middle of all of it. And what's crazy, I remember asking you, you were like, yeah, I'm going to go. And this was like in November. I'm like, you're not going to wait until January? He's like, nah, I'm going to go now, right before Christmas, like 4 weeks before Christmas. I'm like, you're crazy.
Yeah, basically.
And like, how has that been? Because like, I see a lot of like guys who have been through things like that in their church that like you experience at Harvest, and they didn't make it to the next church. They're now selling insurance or doing something else or working for themselves or whatever, because there's so much burden that they carried for that long that they just said, I couldn't do it anymore. And like, I'm guilty of that. Like I left, whether, and I do believe it was God's timing, but it would have taken a lot to put me into another church. It would have taken a serious kick in the butt to, push me somewhere. And you landed somewhere, which is really cool. And I think that's God's testament to what he's doing in your guys' life, but that's a lot.
Yeah. I think it came down to the culture being what it was, allowed that to be a second, I think, sweet season versus, I think, which is, again, evidence, I think, of his hand, because I think it had to be that, or I don't think I probably would. Like, I think after everything I've experienced, like, if I was going back into like a ground up thing, I don't think I could probably do that. But coming into a space where it feels like everything I've learned from Harvest, it feels like I'm entering into a space where that is what's required and needed for where they're at. And so it feels like I can kind of almost apply the past 12 years and take it to a place that's looking to try and meet the need of growth. It just feels like it's a really nice kind of marriage of that. And so yeah, I mean, it's been a lot. I feel like the church is 12 years old. I think they have they're over 20,000 across 10 campuses, which is just wild.
It's crazy.
What I keep saying is it's a very excellently run church. But no one can take credit for what the Lord's doing there on a human level. Like, there's a lot of churches that are run really well and that do a really good job. And I think my belief is that the culture and the hearts behind the people that are leading and running things, that God is honoring that. And I think that, because, Joby, the lead pastor, goes plenty of places and they're like, dude, what's the secret sauce? He's like, God, we don't have a secret sauce.
Yeah, it sounds cheesy, but yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's just God's hand is on it. And it would feel very disingenuous to try and take credit for things that we shouldn't take credit for. And so, so it's just been, I've felt immense, not that I didn't feel loved at Harvest, like I felt, definitely loved, but it feels like in the short time I've been there, the amount that they have encouraged and just like affirmed, it's like almost to the point where like I don't think I'm that great. Like I think I think you guys should. It's like almost uncomfortable. But what I've learned is like they see the value in like the things that I'm bringing to the table, and they're like affirming that. And it's just it's been helpful. It's been coming to a place new after 12 years is obviously a new thing. I haven't done that in 12 years. And so I think that has really helped it be a smoother on-ramp. And like, I mean, I'm still struggling. I mean, my insecurities and like, dude, am I the guy to do this? Like, it's the biggest job I've ever done. And it's like, and any of that happens is my own doing. Like, everyone who's there has affirmed me well past what they probably should have.
Yeah.
And so that's been amazing. And so a lot of my focus has been, they're 12 years old, large church, and there's certain ways where you kind of see, like, you would see like a church of that size, you'd be like, oh, it'd be like dialed in this certain way. And there's just, the beauty in it is, like, I feel like I've come at the right time to help build some processes and systems to help kind of meet the growth that's coming and the growth that they've had, and try and kind of almost catch up to like the size of church over the short amount of period of time that it's grown. I mean, it's wild. They're looking at, Lord willing, we'll see, but maybe 4 new campuses next year. And so there's just a lot of that comes with that I'm like, I feel the weight of, and I'm like, how do we steward all this well? And so trying to really develop kind of systems and team culture and build into the team in ways where we can kind of set up the long game in it well. And it's not easy.
Well, maybe talk a little bit about that, where you're having to come in and build trust and, get a good read on what's been there. What are the pain points that the team has been experiencing? How are you then able to kind of ingest that as a leader so you can bring some forward momentum there?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was I knew intentionally I had to focus on relational equity first. And so one of the things that they constantly heard me say is, like, my goal is to just watch and learn before I really do anything. And building relational equity was a great way to do that. And just, say little, watch a lot. And my whole thing was, I don't want to break down fences that I didn't know why they were built.
Yeah.
And so
that's good.
And so that was huge. And so I was like, because I think there's like 15 to 16 full-time employees. And so I was literally doing like 16 one-on-ones a week for like a month.
Dude, that's so many.
It was insane. And everyone was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, this is like, I have to do it. Like, this has to be the first step. And because I really wanted to just get to know everyone on the team, I wanted to build the trust and the relational equity to be able to, where I knew there was going to be some things that I wanted to shift and change, like, they knew the heart behind that wasn't to just be like the new guy making a name for himself or like whatever. Like, no, I think these are things that I'm intentionally looking at, that I think if we do this tweak or that tweak there, that I think it's going to like have this result, which will take us further. And some of those were like simply like, I don't know if you guys use Trello or Microsoft Planner, but there wasn't like a project system in place or Basecamp, like things like that where, 10 campuses, like, I really wanted to build a culture of collaboration. So like, everyone across, the employees that we had different skill sets, different strengths, weaknesses. And I'm like, I want everyone to, figure out who's the best at that thing. And I want us to be able to learn from it. And I want us to be able to help each other. I want us to not feel like we're isolated. I want our centralized team to feel like we're there for each other. And when I was there, like, everything was word of mouth. Oh, I had this thing happen. I had that thing happen. It's like, dude, and for me, like, the amount of things that are going on in my head, like, I can't, I need like physical things to look at, or I will die. And so just like developing something like that was a system that people collaborate over and see, a dashboard of like 10 campuses worth of projects or issues or whatever tickets that you could just like look at and be like, all right, who wants to take what, who's going to collaborate on this and that. And that's like one example, but just things like that helped the team be able to function better. Asset management, things like that. One of the things that's really cool, the guy that was doing the job before me has actually become one of my great friends down there. He's definitely much more on the gear side. And so we just built out a warehouse. His whole role is now completely managing campus launches. So that's not just production, but, kids, students, the whole thing.
That's so cool.
And he's crushing it. His name's Andrew. He's the man. And
he's the guy that we met in April or May. Yeah.
So that's his new role. And they basically bought a warehouse. And so the goal is to take everything that was done outside and do it inside. And he's figuring that out. And so we're figuring out, what does that look like? Yeah. And what does mine and his partnership look like? Because, production is a big part of that. Like repairs, I like kind of organized to where repairs are happening in the warehouse, but obviously it affects us. Extensively. I have a vested interest in the systems being put into the new campuses. How does that look? And so there's a lot of things with that we're trying to figure out where those lines cross and removing as much gray area as possible while also being okay with like, me and him are just kind of partnering and figuring it out together. And thankfully we work super well together, and it allows there to be a ton of grace in all that. And so, I would say that's some of it.
What's been the hardest thing as you're trying to kind of, again, get that visibility into, you have so many campuses. Like, how do you get sort of the data? You mentioned a couple ways of giving people methods of feedback, but what's that been like for you to get into all those spaces?
I think, one, just my relational capacity went through the roof. And so I'm learning, I'm now like on the backside where it's like, okay, doing 16 one-on-ones obviously isn't sustainable.
It's kind of like when you had to do 16 coffees with young adults every week. That was like your preparation for your next season.
You're honestly not far off. Yeah. And like how much young adults built. Because I love like hanging out with people, but I recover by introverting. Yeah. And so it's just like there's a lot of recovering that I have to do with the amount of interaction I'm having. So I'm in the process of figuring it out now how I can have people being invested in and cared for well, while also not being like the hero in it. Yeah. And so what does that look like? And trying to figure that out, that's definitely, I think, a challenge. We went through a book called Radical Candor, which is a great book about, honestly, navigating having the hard conversations, but in ways that, you can, it's done through relational equity that's built, and you have the trust in one another to know that if a person's having this conversation, Lord willing, they're doing it from a place that they think that information is going to better you and better your time. And so that was huge.
That by?
Kim, you'll have to look. Yeah, I remember her name.
Radical Candor.
Kim Scott.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, she crushed it. That's one that Dan Sumter took me through at Harvest. I took the team through it before I left. It's just, for me, it's kind of like as far as leadership and management and just like the culture of that, that's kind of my go-to. And so that and like multipliers is another one. But
real quick, did you feel like you had 16 staff that you walked into? Did you feel like you had pushback from any of them when you first came on staff? And I'm saying this from a place of, I've experienced that, and it was really hard. It was really, really, really hard being the new guy walking into an existing team that was functioning. Yeah. Quote unquote functioning.
Two ways I think. So one, Andrew being the wonderful human that he is, because there's two ways that can go. It could be the guy who's still there could be like, I don't want this guy to do so well because, well, then
what am I doing?
Yeah, right. Yes. And so he just had none of that. He was just so like, good. Adam winning is me winning. Yeah. And so I think he did a huge ton of legwork to set me up for success, awesome. Which is, I am forever grateful for. Yeah. And I think people were just ready. I think, I could have definitely ruined it if I came with the wrong approach, but I think going the relational equity piece, and I think people were ready for that. And I think the combination of the way I went about it and their readiness, I think just inherently pretty fast went to people being just kind of ready to go.
That's awesome.
So I think those things kind of helped. And just the character of people on the team, like in that culture, is they're a great team. Yeah. Like, there's no one on the team that I'm like I just like working with all of them. So I think that the team was already like built with the right people, and I'm just kind of helping direct it.
Yeah. That's so good.
So, the thing I love about this is like, in this context of doing the podcast, and we get to hear so many different stories and how unique, how different, all of the trajectories that people are on that lead them to where they're at, and then the unique set of skills and experiences they're able to bring to that. So, it's cool because the people listening hear your story, and their story is going to be, it's obviously very different. Yeah. But there are things that resonate. There are things that, you had to go through and process, and hard things you had to learn that I think will be good nuggets for even people that are identify that with where they are now. Like, okay, I see myself in that. Yeah. And, one, there's like another side, I'm going to get through it. And two, here are some things that Adam learned that I can kind of hold on to and maybe and learn from and apply as well. So it's encouraging to hear that winding, path that led you to where you are.
Well, I'm super thankful for it. I'm just like, I want my life. I want to give my life to things that truly matter. And not that, that could be done anywhere. There's some ways where being in a church, it's like just evangelizing. You're like, sometimes I kind of wish I was in the market. And I think maybe some point I might do that, go in the marketplace and just solely be just like a light in a place that's dark. But right now I'm just thankful to be able to kind of give myself to the ministry side and have that, you know, it's definitely a win for me. And so, I'm excited to see where things are going to go. I'm also having to like keep myself, like I said, with cylinders opening up. It's like there's potential for me to get into some of the like unhealthy mindsets that I had in the kind of rip roaring days of Harvest. And so I'm having to kind of like be careful not to like let where I get my value from, like like fear of human and all these things that honestly no one in there would facilitate.
Sure.
It would all be facilitating of my own pride getting in the way of like, am I good enough? Or am I, it's like, dude, the amount of affirmation I'm getting, like I feel immensely guilty even having that thought, honestly, but I still do, where I'm just like, am I the guy? Like, am I the guy? And everyone's like, dude, you're the guy. Like, you're the guy. And I'm just like, and so I'm like on the back end of just like, all right, be faithful to what's in front of you. Like, stop worrying about it for the guy. Everyone says you're the guy. Just be faithful to what's in front of you and steward the thing that you got. And, until it's not your thing anymore. And so I'm still working on that. I'm in the midst of that. But
I wondered how, or if you've, you know, in the last 7 months run into scenarios that felt triggering to you of like, ooh, like this same scenario, and it, you know, may have happened or a response to something, and it's a trigger response that goes, ooh, the last time this happened, it was in a different ministry and it went very poorly. And maybe not, I hope, you know, I'm not sure, but I could see that.
Honestly, the reality of it is people there have had to tell me, hey, this isn't like the place you were at. And I've had guys, because I've I guess I don't know if that would be considered triggering or whatnot, but I've looked at it through a lens of like fear in something or maybe, and they're like, hey, like you don't have to have fear in that because like
this is different.
This is different. And so I think that's been super helpful.
I used to describe it like, you know, picking up a dog from a shelter, you know, and you or your kids go up to the dog and, you know, you're going to pet it and it flinches or like backs away because like it doesn't know anything than the last experience than what they had. And I don't know new data. And I don't know what that dog, you know, has had in their experience, you know, previously before I met them or took them home or whatever. And it takes a while for them to be like, oh, I think I'm comfortable and you guys are safe. Yeah. And this bed you bought me is safe for me and it's for mine only. And it's a different, you know, scenario. And I think in ministry, so many people leave those hurts, myself included. And I brought those hurts to the next place and went, oh crap, like maybe this isn't the same. Man, but it was on me, you know, and I had to listen to the people that's going, hey, it's safe, man. Like it's okay, versus me dreaming in my head or making up a scenario in my head. Telling my story, writing my own story of, you know, what, you know, the scenario is going to play out exactly like it did
for sure
4 years ago at blank church when this same or similar, you know, thing happened. And so I think this whole conversation goes back to like the culture of the people that you have on your team. And Dolsky's a great example, you know, at Harvest. I'm going, man, he's a great hire. And then you go to a place, you go, these people are great. And all of a sudden it's pretty awesome when you have the right people in the right seat on the bus. Yeah. That the drama isn't as big or it just isn't there. Yeah. When you have people, you know, firing in the right lane, and culturally they're the right fit on the team, you know?
Yeah. And then it doesn't, that experience of like taking 5 years, like sometimes it takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
And, you know, so one of the things that I think I've taken away from it is like, it's easy to think the grass is greener somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, everyone's no one's going to be like, hey, look at my brown grass. Like,
correct.
Everyone shows.
They always show the watered side of the grass.
Yeah.
Not the backyard.
Yeah.
It's got dog poop everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to tend to my front yard more than my backyard. And so I just think there is a lot of culture of like people give it a couple of years and then it's like if it gets hard, like, but the grass is greenest where you water it.
Correct.
And so it took 5 years of watering to like change that thing around. Yeah. And so I guess would encourage people, like, it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes some grit. It takes some kind of long game mentality, and it's like both. You kind of have to have your eyes on the long game and also be present to the steps right in front of you and that lead up to that. And so, sometimes you have to, it takes longer. You have to stick with it and trust that you know where things going. And it's tough 'cause sometimes, there was many a times where I'm like, should I have left already? Like why am I still here? And I just had to keep affirming myself of like, I know why I'm still here. I know what I'm focused on. And so, being open-handed with that and, trusting the Lord that he'll let you know when it's time. And there was our part to play in that. And I like pursued a thing that looked like it could be the thing, but, I also didn't try to make something happen that clearly wasn't like ready for it. So
Well, thanks for sharing that, dude. It's a lot. I know that it encompasses a whole season of ups and downs and a lot of different experiences. But I think, if people listening can take away that focus on relationship and building trust and investing in your people and creating that safe space where you can give safe feedback and you can receive and be a leader that receives feedback and actually can be someone that is grateful for that and views 100%. It as a gift from your team. Like, I think the people who are listening to your story can go and even grow in their context as well from that.
Servant leadership, man. That's the name of the game. It's literally raising up the teams above your own. And so a lot of times we see that reverse of that. People are building their own empire. It's like, no, you're there to build a kingdom that's putting everyone's needs and focusing on how you can help other people win. And so I think when you have the humility to do that, and we all struggle with getting in our own way of that, sets up the right heart to be able to do that well.
So, dude, well, thanks again.
Thanks for having me
all the way up here. And
anytime.
Now we'll go enjoy some Lucky Monk.
I cannot wait.
They don't have anything like it in Florida.
Oh, there's nothing quite like it, man.
Not like that. There's other things, but
you need to go play some golf in Florida, man.
Let me know.
I'll come down in February.
Let me know. You got a place to stay now.
Sawgrass. Here we go. I can't afford Sawgrass. Anyways, thanks again, man. And until next time.
Love you guys.